Hi guys, tonight we open our eyes in a place that feels both familiar and unsettling at the same time. You are lying still somewhere in America in the year 1880. The room around you is dim, not because the sun has not risen, but because light itself is something you ration. Dawn seeps in slowly through a window that does not quite fit its frame. You hear it before you see it. A distant wagon wheel groans. A rooster announces the morning with no concern for anyone's sleep. Somewhere nearby, woodcax as a house settles back into itself after the long night. You take a breath, and the air feels cooler than you expected. Even indoors, the outside weather has a way of finding you. The smell of yesterday's smoke lingers in the walls and your clothes. It clings gently like a reminder that fire is not decoration here. It is survival. As you shift, the mattress responds with a tired sound, stuffed with straw or horsehair that has flattened unevenly over time. Comfort exists, but it is a negotiated thing. This is everyday life in 1880 America. And before you settle into it too confidently, here is the reality check. You probably won't survive this without adjusting your expectations. Not dramatically, just quietly. There are no buttons to push, no switches to flip, no instant fixes waiting for you. Everything takes effort, everything takes time, and almost everything leaves a mark on your body by the end of the day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are here, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights and let yourself stay here with me. You lie still for a moment longer. Not because you are savouring rest, but because waking up is a process. In 1880, the day does not begin with alarms or notifications. It begins when light reaches a certain point in the room, when sound grows unavoidable, when responsibility nudges you awake without apology. For many Americans at this time, especially outside the largest cities, mornings are governed by the sun. Artificial light exists, but it is expensive, dim, and inconvenient. The mainstream historical reality is that most households structure their entire day around daylight hours, rising early and winding down shortly after dark. As you sit up, you notice how quiet your body feels compared to the world around you. The nation itself feels restless. Railroads stretch across the continent like iron veins. Towns expand, contract, and sometimes vanish altogether. Newspapers talk about industry strikes, inventions, and progress. Yet your morning begins the same way it did decades earlier. You wake, you assess the temperature, you listen. There is subtle tension in the air that you cannot quite name. Scholars often point out that the 1880s sit awkwardly between eras. The frontier is not gone, but it is shrinking. Cities are growing, but they are not yet modern. Historians still argue whether people living through this moment felt they were part of something new, or whether change crept in so slowly that it felt like the same hard life with different tools. You swing your feet toward the floor. The boards are cool even in summer. In winter, they can feel like punishment. Shoes wait nearby, already shaped to someone else's feet from years of wear. You do not own many pairs. Most people do. A quirky detail from household inventories of the time shows that some families list shoes alongside tools, not clothing, suggesting they are seen more as equipment than fashion. You stand stretching carefully. Your joints remind you of yesterday's work. Whatever you did, whether it was farm, labour, factory tasks, domestic work, or trade, your body remembers it clearly. Rest here is functional, not indulgent. Sleep exists to prepare you to work again. As you move toward the wash basin, you hear other signs of life. Someone coughs behind a wall that is thinner than you would like. A baby cries briefly, then settles. If you are in a city, the soundscape is already building. Horses, carts, distant voices, and the dull rhythm of industry hum together into something constant. If you are in a rural setting, the sounds are fewer but sharper. Wind through grass, animals shifting, wood knocking against wood. You pause by the window. Glass is imperfect, slightly warped. It bends the world outside just enough to remind you it was made by hand. You see movement, people are already up. Always up, there is a sense especially strong in this period that idleness is dangerous. Not morally dangerous in the abstract, but practically so. If you fall behind, there is no safety net waiting underneath. One commonly accepted fact among social historians is that the average American in 1880 works longer hours than their descendants would a century later, with fewer breaks and fewer protections. Yet people do not describe themselves as overworked. They describe themselves as doing what is necessary. Language softens hardship when there is no alternative. You splash water on your face, it is cold, it always is. Heating water requires time and fuel, and mornings rarely allow for either. There is a small shock that pulls you fully awake. Your reflection looks back at you without flattery. Lines come early in this era. Sunwind labour and stress leave their signatures quickly. As you dry your hands, you think about how this day will unfold. Even if only subconsciously, meals must be prepared. Tasks must be completed. Tools must be maintained. Time is not something you manage. It is something you chase. There is a quiet acceptance in this that can feel calming once you stop resisting it. Some historians suggest that this constant engagement with physical reality creates a different sense of self. You are not separate from your environment. You respond to it directly hour by hour. Others disagree, arguing that people in 1880 felt just as mentally restless and emotionally complex as we do now, only with fewer outlets for expression. You take one last look around the room. Everything you see has a purpose. Nothing is accidental, nothing is extra. The day is waiting not patiently but persistently. And as you take your first steps into it, you realize that this ordinary morning repeated millions of times across the country is where history actually lives. You move closer to the washstand, aware that this small ritual is less about freshness and more about readiness. The basin sits where it always does, chipped at the rim. Its surface dulled by years of use. The water inside reflects the window light faintly, not inviting, just available. You dip your hands in again, noticing how quickly the cold becomes tolerable once you stop flinching. That adjustment happens often in 1880. Discomfort does not disappear. You simply make room for it. Washing in the morning follows a quiet sequence. Face first, hands next, sometimes a quick pass over the neck if the day ahead calls for public appearance. Full bathing is rare, often reserved for warmer months or special occasions. A widely accepted historical detail is that many Americans in this era bathe infrequently by modern standards, not because of ignorance, but because heating water takes effort. Privacy is limited, and medical advice about bathing is inconsistent. Cleanliness means something different here. It is practical, not pristine. You reach for the towel. It feels stiff air dried slightly rough against your skin. Soap sits nearby, homemade or locally purchased, smelling faintly of lye and fat. It cleans, but also dries your hands quickly. You rinse sparingly. Water is carried, not summoned. Every splash reminds you that someone filled this basin by hand. As you dress, you notice how each garment is layered with intention. Underclothes are simple, often made of cotton or linen, chosen because they can be washed and repaired. Over them go heavier pieces of wool, if available, designed to trap warmth rather than flatter shape. Buttons are precious. Missing one means inconvenience later. Clothing here is an investment worn until it thins patched until the patch itself needs repair. There is a quiet rhythm to this process. No mirrors everywhere, no options laid out. You wear what you own. A quirky observation from period diaries mentions that some people slept in the same clothes they wore during the day, especially during colder months to save time and retain warmth. Changing outfits is not a daily expectation for everyone. As you tie laces or fasten hooks, your mind already moves ahead to what the day demands. There is little separation between personal time and work time, even this moment standing half. Dressed in the cool air feels transitional rather than private. You hear movement elsewhere in the house. Others are awake too. Morning is communal whether you want it to be or not. If you step outside briefly, perhaps to shake out a rug or fetch something left near the door, the air greets you sharply. The smell of earth animals, smoke, and damp wood mixes together. It is a scent profile that people of this era would recognize instantly. though few would describe it in words. Horses nearby shift their weight. Chickens scratch impatiently. Somewhere a metal latch clicks open. The day is beginning everywhere at once. One mainstream historical fact often overlooked is how early most people start working in 1880. For agricultural families, dawn is already late. For urban labourers, shifts may begin early to align with factory schedules or delivery routes. There is no universal start time, only shared urgency. You step back inside, closing the door carefully to keep what little warmth remains. Breakfast is not yet ready, but preparations are underway. You smell it before you see it. Something grain-based, something filling. Meals in this era are designed to sustain energy, not create leisure. Eating is part of the workday, not a break from it. As you sit or stand nearby, waiting your turn, you reflect briefly on how quiet your inner life feels compared to the noise outside. There is thinking here, of course, worries, plans, hopes, but they run alongside physical tasks rather than replacing them. Historians still argue whether this constant engagement with manual routines reduced anxiety or merely buried it beneath obligation. Conversation, if it happens, is minimal. Mornings are not social hours. Words are saved for later when energy loosens and time feels less compressed. A nod, a short comment about the weather, maybe a remark about work ahead. That is enough. You notice how children move through the space. Smaller bodies navigating the same expectations with fewer allowances. They know where to stand, what not to touch, when to speak. Childhood in 1880 is not separate from it, is preparation for it. This is not cruelty, it is necessity. Families rely on every capable hand. A curious detail recorded by social observers of the time notes that many children could perform complex household tasks by the age of 7 or 8 skills that would surprise modern adults. Some scholars see this as evidence of resilience. Others suggest it reflects a lack of alternatives rather than deliberate training. As breakfast finally appears simple and warm, you take your place. The food tastes plain but satisfying. Texture matters more than flavour. Heat matters more than variety. You eat steadily, aware that this may be your most substantial meal for hours. Outside, the light strengthens, shadows shorten. The window glass catches it unevenly, scattering it across the room in soft, imperfect shapes. This is the signal you have been waiting for. The day is officially underway. You rise, wiping your hands, already thinking about the next task. Morning rituals are complete, not ceremonially, but practically. You are awake, you are dressed, you are fed. That is success here. As you step forward into the flow of the day, you carry with you the quiet understanding that this rhythm repeated daily across the country is what holds everything together. Not grand speeches, not inventions alone, just millions of mornings like this, unfolding without pause. You sit down to breakfast with a posture that suggests readiness rather than relaxation. The table is worn smooth where countless elbows have rested before yours. It does not wobble because someone long ago fixed it properly, knowing there would be no time later. The chair cacks softly as you shift your weight to a familiar sound that fades into the background of the morning. Food arrives without ceremony. No one announces it. It simply appears placed where it belongs. What you eat is shaped entirely by what the day ahead will demand from your body. In 1880, American breakfast is not about preference. It is about endurance. You are given something warm, dense, and filling. Cornmeal mush bread, thick with yesterday's baking. Maybe salt, pork, or eggs if circumstances allow. Coffee appears often, though it is thinner and harsher than what you might expect, stretched carefully to last. Milk is fresh, only if the animal producing it is nearby. Otherwise, it has already been transformed into something more stable. A well-established historic reality is that most working Americans consume far more calories in the morning than modern eaters do. Not out of indulgence, but necessity. Physical labour burns energy quickly. Skipping breakfast is not a lifestyle choice. It is a mistake that makes itself known by midday. You take a bite and feel warmth spread slowly through your chest. The taste is plain but comforting. Texture matters, Soft food is easier on tired teeth. Chewy food lasts longer in the mouth, making you feel fuller. Meals are designed with practical wisdom passed down quietly, not written in manuals. People know what works because their parents knew and their parents before them. There is very little waste. Every crumb is noticed. Every leftover is already assigned a future use. Bread that goes stale will become something else. Fat saved today will flavour tomorrow's meal. Even bones have value. They become broth. This careful attention to food is not framed as thrift. It is simply how things are done. You notice how quickly the meal passes. There is no lingering conversation, no checking the time. The rhythm is efficient. Eat enough. Do not eat too much. Save energy for later. A quirky detail found in some rural household accounts describes people dipping bread into hot coffee or broth. Not for flavour, but to soften it and make chewing easier, especially for older family members who could not afford dental care. As you chew, your mind drifts briefly. You think about how this food connects you to land, animals, weather, and labour. Everything on the table required time. Someone planted something, someone fed something, someone waited. In an era before refrigeration is widespread, timing is everything. Miss it and the food spoils. Get it right and the family eats. Historians still argue whether diets in 1880 were healthier than those of later industrial periods. Some point to fewer processed ingredients and more physical activity. Others note the lack of variety, vitamin deficiencies, and seasonal hunger that shaped many lives. The truth likely sits somewhere in between, unevenly distributed across class and geography. You finish your portion and pause listening. Plates are set aside, cups are drained. Someone stands to clear the table. This is not a shared responsibility in the abstract. It is assigned, known, and rarely questioned. If you are a child, you help. If you are an adult, you move on to the next task. As you rise, you feel the weight of the food settle. It does not make you sluggish. It steadies you. That is its purpose. Outside, the day is brighten enough to reveal details that were hidden earlier. Dust in the air, mud on the path, the edges of fences that need attention. You step out or prepare to carrying the memory of the meal with you. It will have to last. Lunch may be light. Dinner is hours away. Snacks are uncommon. Eating is planned, not spontaneous. Hunger is expected and managed, not immediately satisfied. There is a certain mental discipline that comes with this. You learn to ignore small signals. You learn to pace yourself. Some social observers of the time commented on how people could work long hours, with little complaint attributing it to moral strength. Others suggested it was simply habituation. When scarcity is normal, endurance becomes invisible. As you begin your work, the memory of breakfast fades into the background, replaced by motion. Hands busy themselves, feet find familiar paths. Tools are lifted, set down, adjusted. But the energy from that meal remains quietly supporting each movement. Occasionally your thoughts return to the table you just left. You think about how meals anchor the day. Morning food launches you forward. Evening food brings you back. Everything in between is sustained by that initial investment. In some households, breakfast is the only time everyone is present at once. After that, the day scatters people in different directions: fields, workshops, kitchens, streets. This shared moment, brief and unremarkable, becomes the closest thing to daily unity. You take a breath, noticing how the air smells different now. Warmer, more active. The morning is fully alive. Breakfast has done its work. You are ready whether you feel it or not. As you move deeper into the day, you carry with you the understanding that food here is not comfort alone. It is strategy, it is planning made edible, and as ordinary as it feels, this way of eating shapes the strength of bodies that build railroads, tend farms, raise children, and quietly carry a nation forward. You move deeper into the house, or perhaps across a small apartment or cabin, becoming more aware of how the space itself participates in your day. These walls are not passive. They hold heat when they can release it when they must, and complain audibly when the weather shifts. A floorboard sigh under your step. A door sticks slightly, reminding you that wood swells and shrinks with the seasons. Homes in 1880 America are not sealed environments. They breathe along with you. You pause to take in the room, even if only subconsciously. Furniture is arranged for use, not symmetry. A table near the window catches the best light, because light matters. A chair sits close to the stove because warmth is earned by proximity. Shelves hold only what is needed, and often less than that. Space is not something you decorate, it is something you manage. It is generally understood that most American homes in this period lack what would later be considered basic conveniences. Indoor plumbing is rare outside certain urban neighborhoods. Central heating does not exist. Water arrives by bucket, waste leaves the same way. This shapes how you move, how you plan, and how you think. Every task connects to another. You do not wash without thinking about where the water came from or where it will go. You notice the ceiling low by modern standards trapping warmth, but also smoke. Soot stains mark the path of years of fires. Even in homes with stoves, smoke has a habit of lingering. Chimneys draw imperfectly, windows open reluctantly in cold weather. The smell of fuel becomes part of the structure itself. Over time, you stop noticing it unless it changes. The house is quieter now than it will be later, but not silent. Somewhere fabric brushes against fabric as someone moves. A pot is set down, a hinge clicks. These sounds form a familiar map. You can tell who is awake and where they are without seeing them. Privacy here is defined by behavior rather than walls. An offbeat detail from building records and personal journals shows that many families modify their homes constantly. A lean-to added 1 year, a window patched instead of replaced, a room divided by a hanging cloth rather than a wall. Houses evolve slowly, shaped by need rather than design. What you see around you is not a finished product. It is a pause in a long process. You run your hand along a surface feeling grooves worn by repetition. This place remembers previous occupants. Even if you have lived here all your life, the marks are not all yours. Homes in 1880 often pass between generations or between unrelated families, carrying traces of each. You adapt to them rather than remake them. There is a sense of careful order here, not neatness exactly, but logic. Items are kept where they are most useful. The stove tools are close to the stove. The sewing basket sits where light is best. Shoes line up not for appearance, but to avoid stumbling in the dark. When electricity is absent, the layout of a home is designed around predictable movement. Some historians suggest that this constant awareness of space fosters a different kind of attentiveness. You know where things are because forgetting cost you time and energy. Others counter that people simply accept inconvenience as normal, adapting without conscious reflection. The debate remains unresolved, shaped largely by interpretation rather than direct testimony. You glance toward the door, aware that stepping outside will shift everything again. Indoors, the world is contained, limited, manageable. Outdoors, it expands rapidly. Weather presses in, noise spreads out. Still, the house is never fully separate from what surrounds it. Cold leaks through gaps, heat escapes upward. Rain announces itself loudly in urban settings. Homes stack against one another, sharing walls and sounds. In rural areas, they stand alone, exposed to wind and distance. Either way, the structure reflects its environment. City dwellings tend to be narrow, vertical efficient. Country homes spread outward when they can claiming land instead of height. You notice how light changes as the sun rises higher. Shadows retreat from corners. The room feels slightly more generous. This shift signals time passing without clocks. You do not check the hour. You sense it. Your body aligns itself to these cues naturally, the way people have done for centuries. There is work to be done within these walls before you leave them for the day. Beds are smoothed not to impress, but keep straw from shifting too far. Ashes are cleared carefully, saved for later use. Nothing is discarded thoughtlessly. Even waste has potential value. Accounts from the era mention children tasked with maintaining the home from an early age, not as punishment, but as training. Knowing how to manage a space means knowing how to survive within it. Skills learned here carry outward into every other part of life. You take one last look around, but the house feels steady even if imperfect. It has weathered storms, seasons, and human moods. It will continue to do so long after this particular day ends. As you step away, you carry the subtle awareness that this structure is more than shelter. It is a partner in your routine, shaping your movements, conserving your energy when possible, demanding it when not. In 1880, America homes are not backdrops. They are active participants in daily life, quietly influencing how each ordinary moment unfolds. You turn your attention to what you are wearing. Not in a reflective way, but in a practical one. Clothing in 1880, America something you notice through sensation rather than appearance. You feel the weight of it on your shoulders, the way fabric pulls slightly when you bend the familiar pressure at the waist or cuffs. These garments have already adapted to you, stretched and softened by months or years of use. New clothes are rare enough that you remember them clearly when they arrive. Getting dressed each morning is less about choice and more about sequence. Undergarments first thin and close to the skin, designed to absorb sweat and protect outer layers. Over that comes whatever provides warmth and durability. Wool is common where it can be afforded scratchy at first, then gradually moulded into something tolerable. Cotton appears where trade routes allow it. Linen persists in older households. Each material carries its own smell, especially when damp or warmed by the body. It is widely accepted among material historians that most Americans in this period own very few complete outfits, a work set and a better set, sometimes only distinguished by how recently they have been washed or mended. Sunday clothes exist, but even they are expected to last for years. Fashion changes do reach people through catalogues and newspapers, but adoption is slow and selective. Function always wins. You adjust a sleeve, noticing a patch sewn carefully into place. Someone took time with it, making the stitches small and even. Repair is not embarrassing here, it is evidence of care. A patched garment suggests responsibility rather than poverty. In fact, a visible repair can be a quiet point of pride, proof that nothing was wasted unnecessarily. A curious note from period sewing manuals reveals that many women and some men learn to mend long before they learn to read fluently. Needlework is treated as essential knowledge on par with cooking or basic arithmetic. The ability to extend the life of clothing can mean the difference between comfort and exposure, especially during colder months. As you move, the clothes respond. They are not flexible in the modern sense. They resist sudden motion. They encourage steadiness. You learn to lift, bend, and walk in ways that accommodate the cut and weight of what you wear. Over time, your body and your clothing reach an understanding. You move differently than you would without them. Shoes deserve special attention. They are heavy, stiff, and often mismatched slightly as leather stretches unevenly. Breaking them in takes patience. You lace or buckle them carefully, knowing that discomfort now is preferable to blisters later. Footwear repairs are common, so as are replaced. Heels are reinforced. Walking long distances in poorly maintained shoes is a risk few can afford. Some researchers note that posture in this era is shaped by clothing as much as by labour. Corsetry belts, suspenders, and layered garments subtly guide how people stand and sit. There is disagreement among scholars about how restrictive these garments truly were for daily life, with some arguing they were more adaptable than popular imagination suggests, while others emphasize the cumulative physical strain. You glance down, taking in the muted colors, browns, grays, dark blues. These shades hide dirt, and better than lighter ones. Bright colors exist, but they fade quickly and require care. Practical households avoid them, unless there is a reason. Dyeing fabric is possible, but uneven results are common. Simplicity reduces disappointment. As you prepare to leave the house, you add outer layers if the weather demands it. A coat heavy enough to block wind, a shawl pulled tight, a hat that serves both warmth and protection from sun or rain. Headwear is nearly universal. It signals respectability, but it also shields you from elements that are not easily escaped. You feel the accumulated weight. Now, clothing here is not minimal. It surrounds you. It presses in slightly, but it also protects you. When the wind cuts across open ground, the layers matter. When sparks jump from a fire, thick fabric matters. When you brush against rough surfaces, durable weave matters. There is little self-consciousness about appearance in motion. Once you step outside, everyone else looks much the same. Individual expression exists, but it is subtle. A particular hat shape, a scarf tied differently, a carefully kept collar. These details speak quietly to those who know how to listen. Diaries from the time occasionally mention the sensory relief of removing heavy clothing at the end of the day. The act is described not as vanity, but as release. Your shoulders lighten, your skin cools. Until then, the garments remain part of you, companions through work and weather. As the morning progresses, you stop noticing the clothes unless something shifts. A seam rubs unexpectedly, a button loosens. These small issues register immediately because they threaten comfort and efficiency. You make a mental note to address them later. Neglecting such things only compounds the problem. There is an intimacy between people and their clothing in this era that modern abundance has diluted. You know where each piece came from, who made it, who repaired it last. Sometimes you know who wore it before you. Garments carry stories quietly passed down along with fabric. You move forward into the day dressed, not for display but for endurance. What you wear will absorb sweat, dust, smoke, and effort. By evening, it will tell the story of the day without words, and tomorrow. Unless something tears beyond repair, you will wear it again, adjusted slightly, ready to continue. In 1880, America clothing is not a reflection of mood. It is an agreement between body and world. You accept its limits. It supports you as best it can, and together you move on. You notice the children almost immediately, not because they draw attention to themselves, but because they move with purpose. Small bodies, quick hands, alert eyes. They do not linger. They do not wait to be told twice. In 1880, America childhood unfolds inside responsibility rather than apart from it. You see it in the way a child reaches for a bucket without complaint or steps aside instinctively when an adult passes carrying something heavy. There is no clear line where play ends and work begins. The two blur together. A child may hum while sweeping. Another turns a task into a quiet game, racing the sun across the floor with a rag. These moments of imagination exist, but they are woven through obligation. Time is not segmented into activities labelled learning, leisure, and labour. Everything teaches something. It is commonly recognised that children in this era contribute meaningfully to household survival from an early age. On farms, they feed animals, gather eggs, fetch water, and help during planting and harvest. In towns and cities, they run errands, mind younger siblings, or assist in family businesses. This is not framed as exploitation within the household. It is framed as participation. You watch how expectations are communicated, rarely through long explanations, more often through example. A child sees what needs doing and does it. Correction happens quietly. Praise is brief. The goal is competence, not applause. Mistakes are treated as part of learning, but repeated mistakes draw sharper responses. There is little patience for carelessness when resources are thin. A detail tucked into personal letters from the period reveals that many parents worry less about their children working too hard and more about them being idle. Idleness is associated with moral drift, illness, or trouble. Keeping busy is seen as protective. Movement means usefulness. Usefulness means belonging. Education exists alongside this, but it must fit around labour. School attendance varies widely depending on region, season, and family need. During harvest or busy periods, classrooms empty. Teachers expect this. Children return when they can, picking up where they left off. Progress is uneven, but accepted. There remains disagreement among historians about how children experience this way of life emotionally. Some argue that early responsibility fostered confidence and resilience. Others suggest it suppressed play and emotional expression. Evidence appears on both sides. Diaries written later in life often recall childhood as both demanding and deeply familiar, remembered through routines rather than milestones. You notice how children speak to adults. Respect is expected, but warmth is not absent. Laughter appears in brief flashes, jokes surface unexpectedly. Yet, there is an awareness of hierarchy that shapes every interaction. Children know their place, not through fear alone, but through repetition. The structure of the household teaches it daily. As you move through the space, you see how tools are sized for smaller hands. A broom cut shorter, a stool placed near the counter. Adaptations appear not because someone planned them, but because someone needed them. Households evolve to include everyone who lives within them. In working-class urban families, children often contribute financially as well. They may sell newspapers, carry messages, or work in workshops. Wages are small but meaningful. Coins handed over at the end of the day represent food on the table. This knowledge settles into children early. Money is not abstract. It is counted and accounted for. Observers of the time sometimes remark on how grown-up children seem, their posture, their speech, their seriousness. Yet this does not mean joy is absent. It simply appears in different places. A shared story at night, a moment by the fire, a quick game in the dirt before being called back. You hear a child reciting something under their breath. Perhaps a lesson, perhaps a rhyme. Learning happens informally, constantly, not always in classrooms, but through listening, watching, repeating skills, passed down without instruction manuals. You learn by doing until your hands remember. Some educators of the era argue passionately that schooling should take precedence over labour, while others insist that practical skills matter more than books. This debate continues well into the future, shaping laws and reforms. In 1880, however, theory gives way to necessity. Families decide what they can afford in time as well as money. As the day progresses, children scatter into their roles. One disappears outside. Another settles near the hearth. Another trails behind an older sibling. You realize that for them, this environment is not something to adjust to. It is the only normal they know. You reflect briefly on how quickly childhood seems to move here. There are no prolonged transitions, no extended adolescence, as it will later be understood. Capability defines age more than years do. When you can do the work, you are expected to do it. By evening, fatigue will touch children just as it touches adults. Sleep comes easily when bodies are used fully. Complaints are rare, not because hardship is unnoticed, but because it is shared. Everyone is tired. Everyone contributes. As you step away from observing them, you carry the quiet understanding that these children not being prepared for some distant future. They're already living it. In 1880, American childhood is not a waiting room. It is an active role within the household economy and social fabric. Their days may seem heavy by modern standards, but within this world, they are simply learning how to belong. And belonging here is learned through doing. You step into a schoolroom that feels smaller than you expected, even if you have never seen one before. The ceiling is low. The windows are tall but narrow, placed high enough to discourage distraction. Light enters in pale strips, illuminating dust that hangs quietly in the air. Desks sit in uneven rows, their surfaces carved with names, initials, and dates layered over one another like sediment. This room has been used hard, and it shows you take a seat, or perhaps stand at the back, watching as the day settles into its academic shape. School in 1880. America is not a universal experience. Some children attend regularly, others appear only when work allows. Attendance depends less on law and more on circumstance. In rural areas, the calendar bends around planting and harvest. In cities, schooling competes with wages. Education exists, but it must negotiate for time. The teacher stands near the front, posture upright, voice steady. There are few materials. A chalkboard, a piece of chalk worn down to a stub. Books are shared or scarce. Lessons are spoken aloud and repeated until they stick. Memorization matters, recitation matters, understanding arrives later. If at all, the emphasis is on discipline, order, and basic literacy. You notice the range of ages sharing the same space. A young child sounding out letters beside an older one working through arithmetic. This is normal. One-room schools serve entire communities. Progress is uneven. No one expects uniform outcomes. Learning is personal, shaped by opportunity, rather than curriculum design. By this point in the century, many states have passed laws encouraging or requiring school attendance. Yet enforcement is inconsistent. Families still decide how much education they can spare. Reading and writing are valued, but so are hands that can work. A child who can calculate, read instructions, and sign their name is considered prepared enough for most paths. You observe how discipline is maintained. The atmosphere is quiet but not gentle. Authority is clear. Correction is swift. Silence is expected. There is little room for individual pacing. You move with the group, or you fall behind. This approach produces results for some and frustration for others. A memory recorded by a former student recalls the sting of embarrassment more vividly than physical punishment. Standing to recite and forgetting a word, being corrected in front of everyone. These moments linger long after lessons fade. They shape confidence as much as knowledge. You glance around and notice who is missing. In many places, girls attend regularly when families allow it. Yet, their education often stops earlier. Expectations narrow as adolescence approaches. For black children, especially in the South, access to schooling remains limited and unequal, shaped by segregation, funding disparities, and hostility. Native American children face forced schooling, in some context designed to erase rather than support their cultures. Education is never neutral here. It reflects power. There is still uncertainty about how children themselves felt about these experiences. Some later accounts describe school as a refuge from labor. Others remember it as an interruption. Letters and recollections offer conflicting impressions, leaving modern readers to piece together a picture that never fully resolves. You listen as lessons continue. Reading aloud, writing practiced carefully. Numbers worked through slowly. The pace is deliberate, but time still feels scarce. When the bell rings or the teacher signals, the end relief spreads quickly. Learning here is important, but it is not the center of life. It is one component among many. Children gather their things. Slates are wiped clean, books are returned to shared shelves. Some students linger eager, others hurry away, already thinking about chores waiting at home. The classroom empties unevenly, leaving behind only quiet and chalk dust. You step back out into the broader day, carrying the impression of a system doing what it can with what it has. Schooling in 1880, America is shaped by ideals and constrained by reality. It opens doors for some, and barely cracks them for others. It teaches skills, but also teaches limits. As you move on, you realize that education here is not a promise of escape. It is tool useful, but incomplete. Knowledge helps, but it does not replace labor, it supports it. And for most people living this life, that is enough. The world outside waits unchanged by the lesson just completed. Work resumes, responsibility returns, the schoolroom closes behind you. Quiet again until the next group arrives, carrying with them the same mixture of hope, obligation, and uncertainty. You step back into the flow of the day, and work claims you without ceremony. There is no clear signal announcing its start, because in truth, it never really stopped. Tasks simply shift shape as the hours move forward. In 1880, American work is not a compartment of life. It is the structure that holds everything else in place. Your hands find familiar motions almost on their own. Lifting, carrying, turning, sorting. Whether you are in a field, a workshop, a kitchen, or a factory floor, the rhythm settles quickly. Muscles warm, breath finds a steady pattern. There is a certain relief in this repetition. Thinking happens alongside movement, not instead of it. By this point in the century, wage labor has become a defining feature for millions of Americans, especially in growing cities. Factory whistles regulate time. Shift along 10 or 12 hours is not unusual. Breaks are brief and informal. In rural areas, work follows a different clock guided by daylight and weather, rather than machinery. But the expectation of sustained effort is just as strong. You notice how little attention is paid to comfort. Tools are functional, often heavy, Workspaces are crowded or exposed. Safety measures exist unevenly, if at all. Cuts, bruises, and strain are accepted as part of the day. You learn quickly which movements conserve energy and which waste it. Efficiency is learned through soreness. There is a sound to work that fills your awareness. The scrape of metal, the thud of wood, the low murmur of voices coordinating without stopping. In factories, machines dominate the soundscape, steady and relentless. On farms, the noises are more varied, but no less constant. Animals, wine tools, and human effort overlap into something continuous. One account from a factory inspector mentions workers recognizing each other by movement. Rather than face so accustomed, were they to seeing bodies in motion rather than at rest. Identity becomes tied to action. You are known by what you do well, how quickly you do it, and how little supervision you require. As the morning wears on, fatigue makes itself known in subtle ways. A slight delay before lifting, a deeper breath, a pause that lasts a second longer than intended. You do not comment on it. Neither does anyone else. Tiredness is expected. Complaining does not lighten the load. There is debate among modern researchers about how workers perceive this exhaustion. Some argue that people accepted long hours as normal because alternatives were scarce. Others believe that resentment simmered quietly, finding expression later through strikes, unions, and political movements. Evidence exists for both interpretations, scattered across letters, speeches, and newspaper accounts. You notice how tasks are divided. Skilled and unskilled labour exist side by side. Often uneasily, apprentices watch experienced hands closely, learning by imitation rather than instruction. Mistakes are corrected quickly, sometimes sharply. Time spent correcting errors is time lost. Food and water appear briefly, a sip, a bite enough to continue. There is no extended pause unless forced by circumstance. The idea of stopping entirely during daylight feels unnatural. Rest belongs to night. A small but telling detail appears in some workplace records describing workers keeping personal marks on tools not for ownership, but to ensure they could find the one already shaped to their grip. Familiarity matters. A tool that fits your hand reduces strain over hours of repetition. You become aware of how social boundaries operate within work. Gender shapes assignments. Age determines expectations. Race influences opportunity, and treatment often brutally. These divisions are not always spoken aloud, but they are enforced through habit and authority. Work reveals the hierarchy of the society clearly without needing explanation. As midday approaches, light shifts again, heat builds in enclosed spaces, air grows thick. In open ones, the sun presses down. You adjust clothing, wipe your hands, drink when you can. The body becomes the measure of time. Hunger returns gradually. Muscles signal their limits. Despite this, there are moments of connection. A shared glance, a brief joke passed quietly. Laughter appears unexpectedly, then disappears just as quickly. These flashes do not interrupt work, they accompany it. Social life here is woven through labour rather than set apart from it. Some observers later romanticize this sense of camaraderie, others caution against smoothing over the harshness. Both views hold truth. Bonds form under pressure, but pressure remains pressure. The work does not become easier simply because it is shared. As the afternoon stretches on, you feel the accumulated weight of effort. Each task takes slightly more intention, yet you continue. There is no question of stopping early. The day ends when it ends. When work finally begins, tools are set down. Areas are tidied just enough to resume tomorrow. You leave the workspace carrying fatigue with you like an extra garment. It clings, it shapes how you walk. You realize that for most people in 1880 America, this pattern repeats with little variation, day after day, season after season. The work may change, but the expectation of endurance does not. Life is organized around the assumption that effort is continuous and rest is earned. As you move away from the work site, muscles aching but functional, you understand that labor here is not merely economic, it is social. It defines identity, relationships, and self-worth. To work is to belong. To be unable to work is to risk everything. The day is not over yet, but something has shifted. The heaviest part is behind you. You carry its imprint forward, knowing it will shape the evening, the meal, and the sleep that waits later. For now, you keep moving because that is what the day still requires. You begin to notice the contrast as the day carries you onward, a quiet divide that runs through the country and shapes nearly every experience. The rhythm of life feels different depending on where your feet are planted. In one place, smokestacks rise and the air hums with motion. In another, the land stretches wide and patient, waiting for hands and weather to cooperate. This is America in 1880 pulled in two directions at once. If you are in a city, the density presses in on you. Buildings crowd close together, their walls sharing heat, sound, and secrets. Streets feel narrow even when they are not. People move constantly, weaving around carts, horses, and each other. Industry announces itself loudly. Machines clatter behind brick walls. Steam escapes in short bursts. The ground itself seems to vibrate with effort. In rural areas, the space opens up, but the work does not ease. Fields demand attention over long hours. Distance becomes its own kind of labour. Walking takes time. Travel requires planning. Isolation settles in quietly, especially during harsh seasons. You may not hear another human voice for hours, yet the land itself is never silent. By 1880, the nation has tipped noticeably toward industrial production, with factories multiplying and cities swelling rapidly. Census figures from the era reveal that urban populations are growing faster than rural ones, a shift that brings opportunity and strain in equal measure. Yet the countryside still feeds the cities. Grain, meat, timber, and labour flow inward, tying these worlds together even as they drift apart culturally. You feel this divide most clearly in how time is measured. In factories, clocks rule, bells and whistles dictate movement, minutes matter. In farming communities, time stretches and contracts with the seasons. A day might be judged successful by weather rather than output. Both systems demand discipline, but they demand it differently. You notice how values follow these patterns. In cities, speed and efficiency gain prestige. Newness carries weight. In rural areas, endurance and familiarity hold more value. Tools are kept for decades. Land stays in families when possible. Change arrives more slowly and is often greeted with caution. A telling observation from the period comes from a farmer who visits a city for the first time and writes about feeling dizzy from noise and pace, while an urban labourer visiting the countryside complains of unbearable quiet. Each finds the other environment unsettling comfort, it seems. Depends on what you are accustomed to. There is ongoing uncertainty among historians about how deeply people understood this divide while living through it. Some writings suggest a clear awareness of two Americas forming side by side. Other accounts treat these differences as temporary inconveniences rather than permanent shifts. The truth likely varies depending on who you ask and where they stand. You see how work reflects this split. Factory labour fragments tasks into small repeated actions. Farm labour demands versatility. One day you mend fences, the next you tend animals. Specialisation grows in cities. General knowledge remains essential outside them. Each path shapes the body and mind in distinct ways. Social life changes too. Urban neighbourhoods fill with strangers from different regions and countries packed tightly together. Familiarity must be rebuilt quickly. In rural settings, relationships deepen over years. Everyone knows everyone for better or worse. Privacy is scarce in different ways in both places. You pass from one environment to another in thought, even if not in body. News travels unevenly, ideas move faster along rail lines than dirt roads. Innovations reach cities first, then spread out. The future feels closer in urban centres, while the past lingers longer in rural ones. Despite the differences, neither world is entirely separate. Railroads stitch them together. Markets depend on both. Families often straddle the divide, with members moving back and forth in search of work or relief. Letters cross, long distances carrying updates, requests, and longing. As you continue through the day, you sense that this tension between factory and field is not temporary. It is reshaping the country quietly, steadily. Lives are reorganized around it. Expectations adjust. Conflicts begin to form at the edges. You do not need to name it to feel it. The divide is present in the way people speak, the way they measure success, the way they imagine their children's futures. Some look towards cities with hope, others with suspicion. Some see the land as security, others see it as limitation. For now, you move within whichever world you inhabit, following its rules and rhythms. The other exists alongside you, influencing prices, politics, and possibilities, even if you never see it directly. This is everyday life in 1880 America, balanced between old patterns and new demands, with no clear resolution yet in sight. You step into the street, or perhaps along a packed dirt road, and sound becomes the first thing that reaches you. It arrives before detail, a layered presence that fills the space around your body and settles into your awareness. In 1880, America quiet is not the absence of noise. It is simply a different arrangement of it. In towns and cities, the air vibrates gently from constant motion. Hooves strike stone or hard earth in uneven rhythms. Wheels groan as they turn iron rims. Complaining against the ground, someone calls out not loudly, just firmly enough to be heard above the rest. Metal taps metal somewhere nearby. A door slams then. Another. These sounds overlap without cancelling each other out. They stack and persist, creating a background that never fully recedes. You realize how rarely silence appears here. Even when nothing dramatic is happening, something is always moving. Horses breathe. People shuffle. Fabric brushes against fabric. In industrial areas, machinery adds its own voice, steady and indifferent. A press thumps, a belt whirs. Steam escapes in short bursts that sound like sighs away from the busier streets. The soundscape shifts but does not empty. In residential areas, you hear domestic life unfolding through thin walls. Dishes clink. Someone laughs briefly. A baby cries then stops. A radio does not exist yet, but music still travels. A fiddle somewhere down the block. A hymn drifting from an open window. Sound moves freely through space unconcerned with privacy. If you are outside the city, the noises thin out but they sharpen. Wind passes through tall grass with a dry whisper. Insects buzz close to your ear. A bird startles wings, cutting the air sharply before disappearing. Distance stretches sound, making it harder to judge how near or far something truly is. A shout might carry for miles. A sudden crack could be a branch or something else entirely. People living in this era become skilled listeners without intending to. You learn to sort sounds quickly, familiar from unfamiliar, normal from concerning. Your body reacts before your mind finishes identifying what it hears. This sensitivity is not taught, it develops because it has to. There are moments when sound drops away almost entirely. Early morning before the day gathers itself. Late evening when activity slows. These moments feel noticeable precisely because they are rare. When they happen, they carry weight. A hush before a storm. A pause after an accident. Silence is meaningful here, not comforting. Some observers later remark that people in the 19th century slept more deeply undisturbed by artificial noise. Others question this assumption, pointing out that the natural and mechanical sounds of the time were constant and often intrusive. The truth seems to depend on familiarity. What fades into the background for one person can keep another awake. You notice how people communicate across noise. Gestures become important. A raised hand, a tilt of the head, eye contact held just long enough. Speech adapts to words are chosen for clarity rather than nuance. You speak to be understood the first time. Repetition costs effort. A small detail recorded in city ordinances shows repeated complaints about street noise. Even in this era, residents petition for quieter nights, fewer carts, less shouting. The desire for calm is not new. It simply competes with necessity. As you move through the day, sound becomes a measure of time. Morning carries a sharper edge. Midday hums steadily, evening softens. You can tell roughly where you are in the day without looking up, just by listening. The world announces itself constantly. You pass someone and exchange a few words. Your voices rise slightly without either of you noticing. It is not shouting, it is adaptation. Conversation must push through the environment to exist. Silence between people can feel awkward here, as though something has stalled. At times, the noise feels heavy. You crave a corner where it thins. At other times, it reassures you. Sound means activity. Activity means life continuing as expected. Sudden quiet can feel unsettling, as though something has gone wrong. As afternoon gives way toward evening, the sounds shift again. Work noises fade, domestic ones grow, footsteps slow, voices lower. Somewhere a bell rings, marking time, not precisely, but symbolically. You absorb it without comment. You realize the sound in 1880. America is not background. It is environment. It shapes mood, movement, and awareness. You live inside it, responding constantly, even when you are not conscious of doing so. When you eventually step indoors, closing a door behind you, the difference is immediate, but incomplete. A wall softens sound, they do not erase it. The outside world still presses in, muted but present. You carry the day's noise with you, lodged gently in your senses. As you settle, you understand that listening here is a skill as essential as it keeps you oriented, it keeps you safe, it tells you when something has changed. And as the day continues, its slow turn sound remains your companion, guiding you through each ordinary moment without ever fully letting go. You prepare to move farther than your own 2 feet can easily carry you, and immediately you feel the weight of distance. In 1880, America travel is never an afterthought. It shapes plans before they are spoken. You do not decide where to go and then figure out how to get there. You reverse the order. How you can move determines what is possible. You step toward the means available to you. Perhaps it is a horse waiting, patiently shifting weight from one leg to another. Perhaps it is a wagon, its wooden frame scarred by years of use. Or maybe it is simply your own legs, reliable and familiar for most people. Walking remains the most common form of transportation. It costs nothing but time and effort, and both are already spoken for. Horses occupy a central place in daily movement. They pull carts, carry riders, deliver goods, and connect homes to markets. Caring for them is work in itself. They need rest, shelter, and attention. You adjust your pace to theirs. When a horse tires, the journey slows, whether you like it or not. In towns and cities, streets are busy with animal traffic. Hooves strike uneven ground. Wheels carve ruts that fill with mud after rain and harden into obstacles when dry. Movement is shared and negotiated constantly. You watch where you step. You learn to read intention in posture and speed. A collision is not dramatic, but it is inconvenient and sometimes dangerous. Railroads exist now, stretching across vast distances, but they do not replace local travel. They compress space between major points while leaving the spaces in between largely unchanged. A train can carry you across states in days rather than weeks, yet reaching the station still requires effort. Rail travel is powerful, but it is not intimate. It belongs to schedules and tickets, not daily errands. People speak of the railroad with a mixture of awe and unease. It brings goods, news, and strangers. It also brings noise, danger, and disruption. Whether it improves everyday life or simply rearranges its pressures remains an open question, even among those watching it reshape their towns. You notice how travel affects what people carry. Items must justify their weight. A basket holds only what will be used. Packages are wrapped securely designed to survive jostling. Fragile things travel slowly or not at all. Convenience stores do not exist. You bring what you need because acquiring it later may not be possible. A small but revealing detail appears in personal accounts, describing people timing their walks by landmarks rather than clocks. A trip takes as long as it takes to reach the old tree, the bend in the road, the church bell. Distance is measured in familiarity rather than numbers. You feel this instinctively as you move. Weather intrudes into every journey. Rain turns roads into traps. Snow slows everything. Heat drains energy faster than expected. You dress for the trip, not the destination. Plans change without apology. Being delayed is not a failure, it is a condition of movement. As you travel, you become aware of others doing the same. You exchange nods, brief words. Information travels along these paths quietly. News passes from person to person, shaped by memory and emphasis. By the time it reaches you, it has already been interpreted several times. Some later observers imagine travel in this era as leisurely slow enough to encourage reflection. Others point out that slowness often comes with strain. Long distances mean sore feet, tired animals, and lost hours. The pace may be gentle, but the effort is real. You arrive where you are going with a sense of completion. The journey itself counts as part of the day's work. You do not separate it from purpose. Travel is labor that moves you rather than produces something tangible. As you secure your horse or set down what you've carried, you feel the subtle satisfaction of arrival. The body recognizes it before the mind does. Muscles relax slightly. Breath steadies. You have crossed space using the means available to you. In 1880, American movement is deliberate. It requires planning, patience, and physical engagement. You cannot rush without consequence. Distance demands respect. And as you continue through the day, every place you reach carries with it the memory of how you got there. You reach for your money with a kind of quiet awareness that feels heavier than the coins themselves. Currency in 1880. America is something you touch often but think about constantly. It passes through your hands in small amounts, each piece carrying weight far beyond its metal. You do not spend casually. Every transaction is measured against future needs you cannot yet see. Coins dominate daily exchange. Paper bills exist, but many people trust them less, especially outside major cities. Silver and copper feel real in a way paper does not. You hear the clink before you feel the relief. Wages arrive weekly, sometimes daily, sometimes not at all. If work dries up, there is no guarantee built into the system. Payment depends on employers, weather markets, and luck. Markets themselves feel alive. Stalls crowd together, each offering similar goods at slightly different prices. You scan carefully, comparing quality by sight and touch. A cut of meat tells its story through color and smell. Produce reflects the season plainly. There is no illusion of abundance when the earth has not provided it. You buy what is available, not what you crave. By this point in the century, cash wages have replaced barter for many transactions, especially in towns and cities. Yet informal exchange persists everywhere. Favors substitute for money when coins run short. Credit exists, but it is personal. A shopkeeper knows your face, your habits, your reliability. Trust is built slowly and lost quickly. You notice how money changes conversations. Prices are discussed openly. Negotiation is expected. Silence after a quoted cost invites adjustment. No one assumes fairness without confirmation. Every exchange carries a subtle tension, not hostile, but alert. You watch for signs of honesty. Others watch you do the same. A detail from account books kept by small merchants shows frequent tiny purchases recorded carefully. A candle, a bit of thread, a handful of nails. These small items matter. Losing track of them adds up quickly. Precision becomes a habit. Debt hovers quietly in the background of many lives. Some carry it lightly, using it to bridge lean periods. Others carry it heavily, watching interest grow like an invisible shadow. Whether borrowing offers opportunity or traps, families in cycles of dependence remains unclear even to those living within it. You feel the absence of safety nets. If money runs out, options narrow fast. Charitable organizations exist, often tied to churches, but reliance on them carries social cost. Pride and survival negotiate constantly. Asking for help is weighed carefully against long-term reputation. As you move through the market or shop, you notice how money influences people. Linger where they might buy. They hurry past what they cannot afford. Children learn early what is possible by watching where adults stop and where they do not. You complete your purchase and receive change, counting it automatically. Fingers know the shapes without needing to look. This familiarity builds over years. Handling money becomes a form of quiet literacy. You understand its language. Outside the day continues indifferent to your financial calculations. Work will resume, more needs will appear, money will circulate again soon. For now you tuck it away, securely aware that carrying it means responsibility as much as relief. In 1880, American money does not promise comfort. It promises options, limited, fragile options that must be guarded carefully. And as you step back into the flow of the day, you carry those calculations with you, running quietly in the background of every ordinary decision. You begin to notice the boundaries long before anyone names them. They are not posted on walls or written into daily conversation, yet they guide movement with quiet authority. In 1880, America gender shapes the day the way weather does. Constant, influential, rarely questioned aloud. You feel it in where people stand, in who speaks first, in who carries what. Certain spaces seem to lean toward men, others toward women, not by rule alone, but by repetition. Kitchens, wash areas, and child-centered spaces hum, with one kind of energy. Streets, workshops, offices, and meeting halls carry another. Crossing between them is possible, but never unnoticed. Work follows these lines closely. Men dominate jobs tied to wages, heavy labour, and public authority. Women's labour, though equally constant, often stays unpaid and unnamed. Cooking, cleaning, sewing, caregiving, bookkeeping within the home. All of it fills the hours without appearing on ledgers. The house does not run itself. It simply hides the work well. You observe how expectations settle early. Girls are taught to manage space, emotion, and endurance. Boys are taught to manage tools, direction, and authority. These lessons are rarely delivered directly. They're absorbed through watching who is praised and who is corrected. Capability matters, but conformity matters more. Clothing reinforces this structure. The way garments restrict or allow movement subtly shapes behavior. Certain postures are encouraged, others are quietly discouraged. Over time, bodies adapt to what is expected of them. Standing still becomes a skill, so does carrying weight without complaint. You notice how decision works inside households. Major choices often pass through male hands. Yet daily survival relies heavily on women's judgment. Money may be earned outside, but it is stretched, rationed, and directed within the home. This balance creates a tension that is felt more than spoken. Authority and responsibility do not always align. A small moment catches your attention. A woman pauses before sitting, adjusting her skirt with practiced care. Even though no one is watching closely, the habit remains. Years of expectation live in muscle memory. It is not fear, it is awareness. There are conversations about change, especially in cities. Women speak to one another about education, voting, independence. Newspapers carry opinions that yet these ideas move unevenly. In many places, they feel distant, almost theoretical. Daily routines continue unchanged, absorbing only what they must. It is difficult to tell how individuals feel about these boundaries while living inside them. Some seem content finding pride in mastery of their domain. Others carry frustration quietly expressed only in fleeting remarks or private letters. Satisfaction and constraint often exist together, tangled rather than separate. You notice how behavior shifts in public. Women lower their voices, men square their shoulders. Politeness becomes a kind of choreography, each gesture signaling respectability. Deviating from this pattern invites scrutiny. Attention is not always kind. Children absorb all of this effortlessly. They watch who interrupts whom, who defers, who decides. By the time they reach adolescence, the map is already drawn inside them. Choices feel natural even when they are limited. There are moments when these lines blur. A woman takes charge during illness. A man tends children, while work pulls others away. Necessity allows flexibility that ideology might resist. These moments pass quietly, rarely recorded, but they keep households functioning. As you move through the day, you carry these invisible rules with you. They shape your posture, your speech, your sense of what is possible. You do not need to agree with them to follow them. Survival often requires compliance. In 1880, American gender roles are not debated daily. They are lived daily. They define ordinary behavior more than laws ever could. And as the afternoon drifts on, you feel how deeply these expectations are woven into the fabric of everyday life, guiding actions without ever needing to announce themselves. You walk into neighborhoods that feel newly stitched together, places where voices overlap in unfamiliar rhythms, and shop signs carry spellings that take a second glance. Immigration has reshaped these streets quietly but completely. In 1880, America, people arrive carrying languages, recipes, customs, and expectations packed as tightly as their belongings. They settle where work is possible, not where comfort is promised. You sense it in the density. Rooms hold more bodies than they were meant to. Hallways echo late into the night. Cooking smells mingle, sometimes pleasantly, sometimes sharply, depending on how close you stand. Privacy thins, life presses closer. Yet there is energy here, a feeling of momentum that pulls you forward, even when conditions feel rough. Families cluster together for support. A cousin helps find work. A neighbor explains which streets to avoid. Information travels by word of mouth faster than any official notice. You learn which factory hires today, which landlord tolerates late rent, which shopkeeper understands your accent well enough to trust you. These neighborhoods change quickly. A street that sounds one way this year may sound entirely different the next. Children translate for parents. Parents cling to traditions while adapting them out of necessity. Old customs bend rather than break. Meals shift ingredients, holidays compress. Time is short, but memory is long. You notice how tension hums beneath daily interactions. Long-time residents watch newcomers with caution. Jobs feel more scarce when faces multiply. Wages stretch thinner. Accents become shorthand for suspicion. Yet the same streets rely on immigrant labor to function. Bakeries, workshops, construction crews. The city runs on hands that arrived recently. You pass a boarding house where notices are pinned near the door. Rooms for rent, work wanted, work offered. The paper curls at the edges handled often. Inside beds are arranged closely. Shifts overlap, so someone is always sleeping while someone else is leaving. Rest becomes a shared resource negotiated quietly. Children spill into the streets, switching between languages mid-sentence. Their play adapts quickly, games merge, rules shift. They absorb the city faster than their parents do, carrying both worlds at once without needing to choose. There are moments of pride here, new clothes worn carefully on Sundays. Music played late despite complaints. Food prepared the way it was remembered. Even when ingredients are wrong, these acts are small declarations. You are still who you were even here. It is hard to know how permanent any of this feels to the people living it. Some speak of staying only long enough to save money. Others settle without naming it. Time passes. Children grow. Intentions change quietly. What began as temporary becomes normal before anyone notices. Newspapers argue about immigration constantly, often loudly. The streets answer differently. Daily life forces cooperation, where ideology resists it. You borrow tools from someone whose name you mispronounce. You work beside someone whose story you only half understand. Practical needs override opinion. You notice churches and community halls forming, quickly filling gaps left by unfamiliar systems. These spaces offer language, familiarity, and reassurance. They also become targets of scrutiny. Visibility brings both support and resentment. As you move through the neighborhood, you feel the contradictions clearly. Opportunity and exploitation sit side by side. Hope exists next to exhaustion. Belonging feels conditional, yet people keep arriving. The pull remains strong. By late afternoon, the streets grow louder. Work ends in waves. Bodies spill outward. Conversations rise. Laughter appears unexpectedly. Life here is crowded, but not quiet. It refuses to fade into the background. You step away, carrying the sense that immigration in 1880 America is not a single story. It is thousands unfolding at once, overlapping and colliding. The country changes not through declarations, but through accumulation. One family, one street, one day at a time. You feel at first as a small hesitation in the body, a cough that lingers longer than expected, a tightness in the chest that makes you pause before lifting again. In 1880 America, health is something you notice mostly when it falters. There is no constant reassurance humming in the background, no easy certainty waiting to smooth your worry. Wellness exists quietly. Illness announces itself. You wash your hands when you can, but not with urgency. Clean water takes effort. Soap is used carefully. Germs are not invisible enemies yet. The language to describe them is still forming. People talk instead about miasma, bad air imbalance. If sickness comes, you search your memory for drafts, dampness, or fatigue that might explain it. Doctors exist, but they are not always nearby. In cities, you might find one within walking distance. In rural areas, you may wait hours or days. Treatment varies widely. Some physicians rely on bleeding or purging. Others experiment with newer methods. Advice is inconsistent. You listen politely, then decide what you can afford to follow. You notice how much care happens inside the home. Someone stays up through the night. Cloths are soaked and replaced. Broths are prepared slowly. Windows are opened or closed based on instinct rather than instruction. Nursing is learned through experience, passed down quietly through families. Women often carry this responsibility without recognition, balancing it alongside every other task. A moment stands out, a bottle on a shelf labelled carefully, its contents cloudy, patent medicines line shop counters, promising relief from everything at once. Some help briefly, others do nothing. A few cause harm. People share recommendations based on stories rather than proof. Trust moves along personal networks. Children face illness early and often. Feverers pass through households like visitors that stay too long. Some leave without consequence. Others take someone with them. You grow used to uncertainty without ever becoming comfortable with. Survival feels like a combination of care, luck, and timing. You sense how fear and routine coexist. People continue working while unwell because stopping carries its own risks. Missing a day's labour can mean missing a meal. Rest is recommended, but not always possible. Bodies are pushed gently, then firmly back into motion. It is difficult to tell how much people understand about the limits of medicine at this time. Some seem hopeful, others resigned. Many accept sickness as part of life rather than an interruption. Death appears closer, but also more integrated into daily awareness. It is not hidden away. You hear bells occasionally. You see black fabric worn quietly. Life pauses briefly, then resumes. Grief is real, but so is necessity. The world does not stop long enough for prolonged mourning. As the day continues, you carry an awareness of your own body that feels sharper than before. Each breath matters. Each ache is noted. You drink water when you can. You avoid unnecessary exposure. You make small choices meant to protect yourself without ever feeling fully protected. In 1880, America health is not a guarantee. It is condition managed daily with limited tools and abundant effort. And as evening approaches, you feel gratitude not for perfect wellness, but for function, for the ability to keep going, for the quiet blessing of another ordinary day without catastrophe. You turn your attention back to food, not as something immediate, but as something that must be planned for. By this point in the day, the future presses closer. Evening will come whether you are ready or not, and winter always. Winter waits in the background of every decision. In 1880, America eating is never just about today. It is about next week, next month, and the long stretch when the ground gives nothing back. You step into a cool corner, a cellar, a shed, or a pantry space where the air feels different. Thicker, still shelves hold jars lined up carefully, each sealed with wax or cloth. Sunday spoils things. Heat invites rot. Preservation is an ongoing conversation with nature, one that requires attention and respect. You run your fingers along a sack of dried beans, feeling how hard and reliable they are. Grain weights nearby, measured and guarded. Meat hangs salted, or smoked its surface, darkened its smell. Sharp, familiar. These foods have already travelled through time. They are no longer tied to a single-day success or failure. That is their value. The work of keeping food edible stretches across seasons. In summer, when gardens overflow, the pressure is intense. Everything must be harvested, prepared, stored. There is little room for delay. You cut, boil, pack, seal, heat fills the space. Steam fogs windows, hands work steadily knowing that mistakes will surface months later when there is no chance to correct them. Now in this quieter moment, you inspect what remains. You lift a jar, slightly checking the seal by feel alone. You listen for hollow sounds, for signs of air where there should be none. You trust your senses more than instructions. Experience teaches faster than books. A faint memory surfaces. Someone once warned you about a jar that looked fine but wasn't. The smell gave it away only after opening. Since then, caution comes naturally. You learn to waste food reluctantly, but without hesitation when something feels wrong. Illness costs more than hunger. Children learn these habits early. They watch closely as lids are tested and stores counted. They absorb the seriousness without needing explanation. Food is not sacred, but it is close. It represents labour already spent and labour saved for later. You notice how fear threads through this work quietly. Not panic, but awareness. A bad winter, a failed crop, a storm that delays travel. These possibilities sit just beyond the edge of thought, shaping behaviour without overwhelming it. Preparation becomes a way to keep worry manageable. As you turn away from the shelves, you think briefly about how meals change when preservation takes over. Freshness gives way to repetition, texture and flavour narrow, yet satisfaction remains. Warmth matters more than variety when the days shorten. Fullness becomes comfort. Some evenings preserved food feels like a gift from your earlier self. Past labour reaches forward offering relief. Other times it feels like a reminder of limits. You eat what is available and remind yourself why it was saved. The act of storing food also reshapes social life. Exchange happens quietly. A jar traded for help, meat shared after a successful hunt. These gestures strengthen bonds without ceremony. Survival is communal. Even when effort is individual, you close the door or step back into warmer air, carrying the knowledge of what waits when you need it. This awareness settles you. It narrows the future into something you can manage. As the afternoon tilts toward evening, hunger returns slower, this time steadier. You know what can be prepared quickly, you know what must wait. This familiarity reduces decision, freeing your mind for rest. In 1880, America preservation is not a special skill, is part of daily thinking folded into routine like breathing. You do not celebrate it, you rely on it. And as you move on, you carry a quiet confidence born, not from abundance but from readiness. Whatever tonight brings, something warm can be made, something sustaining can be found. For now, that is enough. You notice the shift not by the clock but by the way your body loosens its grip on urgency. The hardest work has passed, and what remains feels optional even if it still takes effort. Leisure in 1880, America does not announce itself loudly. It slips in through cracks in the day, brief and often unplanned. You might sit for a moment longer than necessary after finishing a task. You might lean against a wall, letting your weight settle. These pauses are small, but they matter. Rest is not framed as a right. It is something you take carefully, making sure it does not interfere with what still needs to be done. When leisure does appear, it is simple. Conversation drifts without agenda. Someone hums while working more slowly. A child shows off a small trick learned earlier. Laughter surfaces unexpectedly, then fades. There is no expectation that pleasure must be productive. It only needs to be brief enough not to disrupt the rhythm of the household. You notice how often leisure overlaps with work. A story told while mending a song, sung while stirring a pot. Entertainment rarely exists on its own. It rides alongside effort, making it lighter without stopping it altogether. This blending feels natural here. Separating joy from labour would feel inefficient. In some homes, books appear during these quieter moments. Reading is not always solitary. Someone reads aloud while others listen, hands busy with small tasks. The words fill the room, gently offering a shared focus. Newspapers circulate too, passed from person to person, folded carefully to preserve fragile pages. Games exist, but they are modest. Cards shuffled on a table, a simple board worn smooth by use. Rules are known by memory. Winning matters less than participation. These activities provide structure without demanding intensity. They fit neatly into the edges of the day. You step outside briefly and notice neighbours doing much the same. People linger at doorways. Short conversations stretch slightly longer than planned. Information's exchanged casually. News advice, small complaints. These moments knit the community together without formal gatherings. Music finds its way in as well. Instruments appear when hands are free. A fiddle, a harmonica, a voice carrying a tune learned long ago. The sound does not need amplification. It does not need perfection. It only needs to exist. Music here belongs to everyone who knows it, not to performers alone. You sense that leisure carries a different weight depending on circumstance. For those whose days are especially hard, these moments feel precious. For others, they pass unnoticed. Either way, they do not last long. Responsibility always returns patient and persistent. It is hard to tell how people think about happiness in this context. There is no language of fulfillment or self-care. Satisfaction seems to come from balance rather than abundance, from knowing you did enough today, from being able to stop without guilt even briefly. As evening approaches, these small pleasures grow slightly more frequent. The light softens, movement slow, work that can wait does. You allow yourself to sit without scanning the room for the next task. In 1880, America leisure is not a destination. It is a passing companion. It arrives quietly, stays briefly, and leaves without complaint. And as you let it settle around you for a moment longer, you feel the day begin to release its hold. You become aware of the rhythm of the week as much as the rhythm of the day. Certain hours feel different, heavier with meaning, softer with permission. Faith threads through everyday life in 1880. America, not always loudly, but persistently like a low current running beneath routine. You sense it in pauses, in language, in the way time is shaped. Church bells, when they ring, do more than call people together. They organize attention. Even those who do not attend mark the sound. It signals a moment set apart. On Sundays, the pace shifts. Work recedes where it can. Clothes are brushed more carefully. Shoes are cleaned. Voices lower slightly, as if the air itself expects restraint. You sit or stand among others. Bodies close the room filled with breath and fabric and faint smells of soap and wood. Sermons stretch long. Words move slowly. Some listeners lean forward, absorbed. Others drift, letting familiar phrases wash over them. Attendance is about presence as much as belief. Being seen here matters. It signals belonging. Faith offers structure beyond doctrine. It organizes charity, education, and social expectations. Church groups arrange meals for the sick. They collect funds quietly. They know absences. In a world without formal welfare, these networks fill gaps unevenly but earnestly. Support comes with strings, but it comes. You notice how religion shapes language even outside formal settings. Oaths, blessings, warnings, and hopes borrow sacred vocabulary. People speak of providence when plans succeed or fail. Misfortune is interpreted through moral lenses. Comfort is drawn from repetition rather than resolution. Children absorb these rhythms early. They learn when to be still, when to bow heads, when to speak, and when to listen. Stories are told and retold, shaping understanding of right and wrong, long before laws enter the picture. Morality here feels communal, reinforced weekly through shared ritual, yet belief is not uniform. Some attend out of habit, others out of conviction, some quietly doubt while still participating. The boundary between faith and social expectation blurs easily. You are never quite sure whether a person's devotion comes from belief, fear, hope, or simply familiarity. Different denominations shape communities differently. One favors restraint and quiet reflection. Another encourages expressive worship. These preferences spill into daily behavior. how people dress, how they speak, how they judge one another. Even leisure carries moral weight under these influences. You notice that religion also offers language for endurance. Hardship becomes meaningful when framed as a test. Suffering gains context when placed within a larger story. This does not erase pain, but it makes it easier to carry. For many, faith does not promise relief. It promises explanation. As the day deepens toward evening, religious observance fades back into routine, but its influence lingers. Decisions are weighed against values learned long ago. Kindness is extended, judgment is passed. Both feel justified. In 1880, American religion is not confined to buildings or specific hours. It shapes the tempo of life itself. And as you move on, you carry its quiet cadence with you. Steady and familiar guiding thought and behavior. Even when no one is watching, you become aware of the wider world, not through headlines flashing instantly, but through fragments that arrive slowly and unevenly. Information in 1880, America does not rush. It drifts, it filters, it changes shape as it moves. News reaches you through paper conversation and chance encounters, each leaving its own imprint. A folded newspaper rests nearby, its pages smudged from many hands. You read it carefully, aware that this single sheet may carry days or even weeks of accumulated events. Reports from distant cities feel abstract, almost unreal. Local news, by contrast, lands heavily. A fire down the street, a dispute at the mill, a new family arriving. These details matter because they touch your daily life directly. You notice how rumor fills the gaps between facts. Someone heard something from a traveler, someone else repeats it with added emphasis. By the time it reaches you, certainty is softened into suggestion. You learn to listen with caution, weighing tone as much as content. Truth travels here, but not always intact. Messages move at the speed of horses and trains. Telegraph wires exist, carrying urgent signals between major centres, yet their reach is limited. Most people encounter national events only after they have settled into history. Time creates distance. By the time news arrives, reactions have already been shaped elsewhere. You observe how people discuss what they hear. Opinions form quickly, often based on trust rather than evidence. A respected neighbour's view carries more weight than printed words from afar. Authority grows locally. Belief follows familiarity. A small moment stands out. Someone reads aloud from the paper while others listen, correcting pronunciation, interrupting with comments, laughing at certain phrases. The news becomes communal. Interpretation happens in real time. Meaning is negotiated aloud. It is not always clear how much people expect accuracy. Sensational stories draw attention. Exaggeration is tolerated. What matters is relevance. Does this affect Price's safety or reputation? If not, it fades quickly. You notice that silence also communicates. News not mentioned may be intentionally ignored. Some topics are avoided to keep peace. Others resurface repeatedly because they touch unresolved tensions. What is not said can feel as significant as what is shared. As evening approaches, conversations slow. New information waits until morning. There is no endless stream demanding reaction. The world feels larger but less intrusive. You are aware of events beyond your reach without being overwhelmed by them. In this way, knowledge settles gradually. It becomes part of the background rather than a constant interrupt. You carry what you have heard, sorting it quietly, deciding later what to believe. In 1880, America truth moves patiently. It depends on voices, memory, and trust. And as the day closes, the wider world remains present but distant. Its stories folded neatly until you are ready to open them again. As the day moves on, you sense the presence of authority, not through uniforms everywhere, but through expectation. Order in 1880, America is something you feel more often than you see. It lives in habit, reputation, and the quiet knowledge of who holds influence nearby. Law exists, but it does not arrive with the same shape in every place. In some towns, the sheriff's name carries more weight than any written statute. You know where his office is. You know how he handles disputes. Justice here feels personal. Arguments are settled with witnesses who know both sides. Punishments aim less at reform and more at restoring balance, however imperfect that balance might be. In cities, the picture grows more complicated. Police forces are expanding, but they remain unevenly trained and inconsistently trusted. Patrols walk familiar routes, faces recognized by shopkeepers and residents alike. Enforcement depends as much on relationships as on rules. A warning might replace an arrest. A complaint might disappear quietly. You notice how much is handled without official involvement. Neighbors intervene. Elders speak up. Employers discipline workers directly. Social pressure does much of the work that courts cannot reach. Reputation matters deeply. Being known as unreliable or troublesome closes doors quickly. There are moments when the law arrives suddenly and forcefully. An arrest draws a crowd. Voices rise. Opinions split instantly. Some cheer. Others look away. Authority is not neutral here. It is shaped by race, class, and familiarity. Who you are often determines how rules are applied. You pass by a courthouse or a local office and feel its presence without entering. The building stands solid, meant to convey stability inside. Paperwork accumulates slowly. Cases wait. Decisions take time. Justice moves at a measured pace, sometimes too slow to matter in daily life. People speak of fairness often, but definitions vary. For some, fairness means consistency. For others, it means mercy. These interpretations clash quietly, surfacing during conflicts, and then retreating again. There is no single agreement holding everything together. As evening approaches, the visible signs of authority recede. Offices close. Patrols thin, responsibility shifts back to households and communities. Doors are locked, lights are lowered. Safety becomes a shared effort rather than an enforced one. You feel how fragile order can be maintained through cooperation as much as coercion. Most days pass without incident because people expect them to. Stability here relies on repetition rather than force. In 1880, American law is not an abstract system hovering above daily life. It is woven into it, unevenly applied differently from place to place. And as the night draws closer, you carry an understanding that order survives. Not because it is perfect, but because enough people agree to uphold it quietly day after day. You feel the tension before anyone explains it. It lives in pauses and glances held a fraction too long, in conversations that soften or stop when certain people draw near. In 1880, America reshapes daily experience in ways that rarely announce themselves openly, yet influence nearly every interaction. You notice how space is shared or not shared. Certain doors, seating arrangements form themselves without instruction. Work is divided along familiar lines. Opportunity follows paths worn smooth by habit rather than fairness. These patterns are learned early and enforced constantly, often without words. For Black Americans, especially in the South, daily life carries an added layer of vigilance. Freedom exists on paper, but safety does not always follow. Movement is calculated. Speech is measured. Familiar routes are preferred over unknown ones. The threat is not constant, but it is close enough to shape behavior. Even ordinary tasks carry risk when context shifts in northern cities. The picture changes, but does not simplify. Segregation appears less formal, yet exclusion persists through housing, employment, and social custom. Neighborhoods harden around invisible boundaries. Workplaces assign roles predictably. Advancement stalls quietly. The absence of explicit rules does not equal inclusion. You also sense how other groups navigate similar pressures. Indigenous people are pushed to the margins, their presence acknowledged only when convenient. Chinese laborers face hostility sharpened by law and rumor. New immigrants discover quickly which accents draw suspicion and which trades remain open to them. Belonging is conditional, granted unevenly, and revoked easily. Children absorb these distinctions with unsettling speed. They notice who plays together and who does not. They repeat phrases overheard without understanding their weight. By adolescence, many have learnt exactly where they are expected to stand. There are moments of kindness that break through. A shared task completed without comment. A neighbour offering help quietly. These moments matter, but they do not erase the larger structure pressing down around them. They exist within it, not outside it. It remains difficult to know how people living through this time understand these divisions. Some accept them as natural order. Others question them privately, testing boundaries in small ways. The record left behind reflects both resignation and resistance, often tangled together. As you move through the day, you adjust without thinking. You choose words carefully. You read reactions quickly. You learn when to step forward and when to fade back. This constant calibration takes energy, though it rarely shows on the surface. Evening brings a slight easing, darkness softens visibility. Public spaces empty. The sharpness dulls a little, yet the knowledge remains carried into homes and conversation, shaping hopes and fears quietly. In 1880, American inequality is not always loud. It often works through routine, through what feels normal. And as you settle into the later hours of the day, you understand that these tensions are not separate from everyday life. They are part of it, woven into ordinary moments so tightly that they can be hard to separate even when you feel their weight clearly. You feel the weather before you check the sky. It settles into your joints, your breath, the way fabric rests against your skin. In 1880, American weather is not background. It is an active presence consulted as often as any person whose opinion matters. Plans bend around it instinctively. Ignoring it comes with consequences. Heat arrives early in the day during warmer months, building quietly until it presses down on everything. Work slows not because effort disappears, but because bodies must adjust. Sweat darkens collars. Water breaks become necessary rather than optional. Shade grows valuable. Even animals seek it, gathering under trees or near structures that cast narrow lines of relief. Cold behaves differently. It sharpens rather than weighs. Winter air cuts into lungs and stiffens fingers quickly. You layer clothing carefully, aware that gaps matter. Exposure creeps in unnoticed. The wind finds seams. Tusks take longer. Tools feel heavier. You learn to protect extremities first, knowing that numbness can turn dangerous before you realize it. Rain transforms the landscape almost immediately. Roads soften and swell. Mud clings to boots and wheels, adding weight with every step. Travel plans dissolve without argument. If you must go, you accept delay. If you can wait, you do. Rain dictates patience better than any rule. Storms command attention. Thunder rolls across open land with authority. Lightning flashes briefly, illuminating everything too clearly. You secure what you can and wait. Nature interrupts without apology. When storms pass, they leave work behind. Fences down, fields altered, roofs in need of inspection. You notice how conversation shifts with the sky. Weather opens dialogue. Complaints soften. Shared discomfort builds connection. Everyone feels it. Everyone adapts together. The topic never feels exhausted because it never stops mattering. Seasonal patterns shape memory itself. You recall years by drought or flood, by especially hard winters or generous summers. Time is not marked only by dates, but by conditions endured. These experiences become reference points long after details fade. Even indoors where the press is close, heat seeps through walls, cold settles into floors, humidity swells wood and warps doors. Homes respond audibly. Creaks and pops signal changes outside. You listen and understand. It is never entirely clear how much people feel controlled by the weather versus partnered with it. Some speak of fighting it, others of working with it. Most simply are just carrying on without naming the relationship. As evening approaches, temperature shifts again. The day releases warmth slowly. Breezes move through open windows. In colder seasons, fires are tended carefully, neither too strong nor too weak. Comfort requires attention. Neglect invites discomfort. In 1880, American weather is not something you endure passively. It is something you negotiate with constantly. And as the light fades and the air changes once more, you adjust instinctively, knowing that tomorrow will bring its own conditions and you will meet them the same way you always do. Prepared, attentive and alert to the sky, you notice the light first thinning and warming as it slides toward evening. It stretches across floors and walls in longer shapes, touching familiar objects differently than it did in the morning. In 1880 America, this change matters. Light is not just atmosphere, it is instruction. It tells you how much time remains and what must be finished before darkness settles in fully. As the sun lowers, activity shifts inward. Outdoor tasks wrap up quickly now, tools are returned to their places. Animals are guided back to shelter. Paths are walked with purpose rather than wandering. Once daylight fades, movement becomes slower and more cautious. You plan accordingly without conscious thought. Inside, lamps are prepared. Oil levels are checked. Wicks are trimmed carefully, not too long, not too short. A poorly tended lamp smokes and wastes fuel. A good one glows steadily, casting a soft, uneven circle that defines the room. Shadows deepen at the edges. Corners retreat. You strike a match brief and bright, then shield it instinctively as the flame transfers. The lamp comes alive with a faint sound. A smell follows familiar and not unpleasant. Light now has a cost. Every minute it burns counts against supplies that must last. This dimness changes behavior. Reading becomes slower. Sewing moves closer to the flame. Faces turn inward. Conversation softens. Not out of ceremony, but because voices seem to carry differently at night. You lean closer to hear. Distance shrinks. You notice how much the room feels gathered. The day had scattered people outward. Evening pulls them back together. Chairs are drawn near. Tasks that require cooperation or company wait for this hour. Solitude exists, but it is harder to claim. Shared space feels safer after dark. Outside the world quiets unevenly. Some sounds fade quickly, others sharpen. A distant dog barks. A wheel rattles briefly, then disappears. You listen more carefully now. Darkness makes awareness sharper. Every sound asks for interpretation. You prepare the evening meal if it has not already been done. Is simpler than breakfast or midday food built around what can be warmed easily. The act is calmer. There is no rush. Hunger is present but not urgent. The day's work has already been paid for. After eating, dishes are cleared with efficiency. Water is used sparingly. Everything is set up for morning without discussion. These routines are so familiar they feel automatic. Preparation now saves effort later when light and energy are limited. As the hours deepen, lamplight grows softer. Flames flicker gently with small drafts. Eyes tire, reading gives way to listening. Stories surface, sometimes repeated for the 100th time. No one minds. Familiar words soothe more than new ones. You feel your body responding to the environment. Muscles loosen, breath slows. The absence of bright light invites rest without demanding it. You are not told to wind down, you simply do. In 1880, America evenings do not stretch long. Light limits activity, fatigue encourages surrender. As you sit within the circle of lamplight, watching shadows move quietly across the walls, you sense the day releasing its grip. Night has not fully arrived yet, but it is close enough to feel. You sense a change in how people move when evening settles fully. Steps slow, gestures soften, voices find a gentler range. This is the hour when social rules feel most visible, not because they are enforced, but because everyone is more aware of being seen. Visiting even briefly follows patterns that are rarely spoken aloud, yet widely understood. You approach a doorway and pause, adjusting your posture before knocking. Entering someone else's space after dark carries weight. You do not arrive empty, handed if you can help it. A small gift, news, an offer of assistance. Even presence itself counts as something given, not assumed. Inside, the arrangement of chairs shifts to accommodate you. Space is made deliberately. You are invited to sit where the light reaches best. Hospitality is careful rather than lavish. No one wants to appear wasteful or unprepared. Comfort is offered within limits that everyone recognizes. Conversation unfolds in a predictable way. Inquiries about health come first, then work, then family. More delicate subjects wait, sometimes never appearing at all. Disagreement is handled indirectly. Humor softens edges. Silence is allowed to stretch without panic. You notice how quickly visits end. No one lingers long enough to impose. Time feels borrowed in the evening. Lamps burn. Fatigue waits patiently. When someone rises, others follow, understanding the cue without needing explanation. Boundaries exist even among close neighbours. Certain rooms remain private. Certain topics remain untouched. Respectability is maintained through restraint rather than distance. Knowing what not to ask becomes as important as knowing what to say. Children drift in and out of these gatherings, listening from corners or pretending not to hear. They absorb tone and timing more than words. Social education happens quietly, in moments like these, shaping future interactions without formal instruction. As you step back outside, the air feels cooler, heavier with night. You walk home aware that these small exchanges hold communities together. No grand speeches, no declarations, just visits that end on time and words chosen carefully. In 1880, America's social life relies on mutual awareness. Everyone knows how easily comfort can tip into burden. Courtesy keeps the balance steady, and as you return indoors, closing the door gently behind you, you feel the quiet satisfaction of having shared space without overstepping connection, without demand. You notice how entertainment finds you rather than the other way around. There is no switch to flip, no screen waiting patiently for attention. In 1880, America diversion arrives through people, objects already in the room, and habits learned slowly over time. It fits itself into the evening without asking permission. Someone brings out a deck of cards, edges soft from use. The table is cleared just enough to make space. Rules are known well enough that no one explains them fully. Play begins almost automatically. Winning matters less than continuity. The game exists to fill time gently, not to dominate it. You might find yourself listening instead. A story surfaces, perhaps one you've heard before, but the details shift slightly with each telling. Memory reshapes events, smoothing some edges, sharpening others. No one corrects the storyteller too carefully. Accuracy matters less than... The point is to stay together in the moment. Music appears when someone feels inclined. Instruments are kept close, leaned against walls, or tucked into corners. A fiddle is tuned quickly by ear. A harmonica passes from hand to hand. Voices join in without rehearsal. The tune may wander, but it carries everyone along. Silence follows naturally when the song ends unforced and comfortable. You realize how much of this entertainment depends on participation. There are no audiences here. Only contributors, even listening is active. You nod. You laugh quietly. You supply the next line when someone pauses. Being present is enough. Printed entertainment exists too. Books are prized, often shared, sometimes borrowed for months at a time. Reading aloud turns solitary words into communal experience. The cadence of the reader's voice becomes as important as the content. Pages are turned carefully aware of their fragility. Children gravitate towards simple amusements. A stick becomes a toy. Shadows on the wall invite imagination. Games require little equipment, relying instead on agreement and energy. Play winds down gradually as tiredness sets in. Not because anyone announces bedtime, you sense how these moments of entertainment differ from the rest of the day. They do not aim to produce anything. They leave no tangible result. Their value lies entirely in how they feel while happening. This makes them easy to overlook and easy to cherish. There is a softness to the laughter here. It does not compete with noise. It rises and falls gently. Jokes rely on familiarity rather than surprise. Everyone already knows the characters involved. Humour grows out of shared experience. As the evening deepens, entertainment thins out. Cards are gathered. Instruments are set aside. Stories trail off mid-sentence. No one insists on continuation. The day has already taken enough. You notice that no one seems anxious about missing out. There is no sense that something better might be happening elsewhere. This is it. What is here is sufficient. In 1880, America entertainment does not distract you from life. It sits inside it, woven through the quiet hours, asking only that you slow down enough to notice it. And as the room settles into a comfortable hush, You feel the gentle satisfaction of having been amused, without being exhausted, engaged without being pulled away from yourself. You begin to notice how rarely you are truly alone. Even when the room empties, traces of others remain. A chair still warm, a cup set down moments ago, sounds drifting through walls that are never quite thick enough. In 1880, American privacy is not something you expect by default. It is something you negotiate quietly. Often temporarily, homes are shared spaces in every sense. Multiple generations live under one roof when they can. Boarders fill spare rooms to help cover costs. Children sleep where space allows, not always where preference would place them. Doors exist, but locks are limited. Curtains divide rooms more often than walls. You learn to lower your voice and choose your moments. Even solitude outdoors feels conditional. Fields are open, but eyes still watch. Streets carry constant movement. Someone always seems to be passing, noticing, remembering. Reputation grows out of visibility. Being seen is unavoidable. Being judged follows naturally. You notice how people create privacy through behavior rather than architecture. A turned back, a lowered gaze, a pause that signals interruption is unwelcome. These cues are respected because everyone relies on them. Ignoring them would invite retaliation later when you need the same courtesy. Night offers some relief. Darkness softens outlines. Lamps limit visibility to small circles. You can step just outside the light and feel less exposed. Even then, sound travels. A cough carries. Footsteps announce themselves. Complete invisibility remains rare. Personal thoughts stay mostly unspoken. Feelings are shared selectively, if at all. Writing offers one outlet. Diaries exist hidden carefully. Letters are composed with awareness that someone else may read them aloud or intercept them. Words are chosen with caution. You realize how this constant proximity shapes behavior. Self-control becomes a habit. Emotional restraint feels practical rather than repressive. When space is shared, harmony matters. Conflict disrupts everyone, not just those involved. Children learn this early. They understand which questions to keep to themselves. They sense when adults need quiet. Privacy is modeled rather than explained. Respect is demonstrated through silence as much as through action. There is comfort in this closeness too. Illness does not leave you alone. Grief is witnessed. Joy spreads quickly. Being seen cuts both ways. You are held accountable, but you are also supported. As the night deepens, you find a small pocket of quiet. Perhaps is a corner near the window. Perhaps it is the moment just before sleep when conversation fades. You hold on to it briefly, aware that it is temporary. In 1880, American privacy is a luxury measured in minutes rather than rooms. And as you settle into that small borrowed stillness, you accept it not as a loss, but as part of a life lived closely surrounded by others, rarely unseen, yet seldom entirely alone. You find your thoughts drifting forward as the night settles in, not toward tomorrow exactly, but toward what lies just beyond it. Dreams in 1880, America do not always take the shape of ambition. They're quieter, closer to the ground. They live in small hopes carried alongside routine hopes that must survive contact with reality to be useful. You hear people talk about progress often, with a mix of excitement and caution. New machines promise efficient, rail lines promise connection. Cities promise opportunity. These ideas circulate through conversation and print, arriving unevenly depending on where you live. Some greet them eagerly, others watch from a distance, weighing cost against benefit. You feel this tension in ordinary decisions. Should you stay where work is familiar or follow rumours of better wages elsewhere? Should you invest time learning a new skill or deepen the ones you already have? Change offers possibility, but it also threatens stability. In a world where survival depends on predictability, risk carries weight. You notice how older generations speak about the past with a steadiness that feels reassuring. They describe how things used to be done often, implying that what has lasted deserves trust. Younger voices lean forward, curious, restless. They imagine futures that look different from the present. These perspectives coexist, sometimes uneasily, under the same roof. Fear threads through optimism quietly. Machines can replace hands. Railroads can bypass towns. Markets can collapse without warning. Even good changes arrive with unintended consequences. You sense that no one fully understands where things are headed. Confidence is often a performance offered to steady others rather than express certainty. At the same time, you feel a genuine pull toward improvement. Better lighting, safer tools, more reliable transport, education that opens doors. These ideas take root gradually. They show up first as suggestions, then as habits, then as expectations. Life inches forward without asking permission. You notice how hope expresses itself practically. People say they teach children to read even when schooling is regular. They repair rather than replace believing longevity has value. These actions suggest belief in a future worth preparing for, even when it cannot be clearly imagined. As the house quiets, conversations turn inward, reflections replace plans. You think about what you want for those who come after you, not grand legacies, but comfort, security, a little more ease. These wishes feel modest, yet they carry enormous emotional weight. It remains hard to tell whether people living through this moment feel on the edge of transformation or simply caught in the middle of the ongoing change. The language of hindsight does not exist yet. For now, everything feels provisional, subject to revision. You settle into this uncertainty gently. The future is not something you must solve tonight. It waits patiently, shaped by countless small decisions made by ordinary people like you. In 1880, America, hope and worry travel together. They share space, inform each other, and refuse to separate. And as sleep draws closer, you let both rest quietly, trusting that whatever comes next will be met the same way today was, with effort, attention, and resilience. You prepare for night with a care that feels almost ceremonial, though no one would describe it that way. Safety in 1880, America is not assumed once the sun goes down. It is created through routine attention and a quiet respect for what darkness can hide. You move through the space, checking what needs, checking. Doors are closed deliberately. Latch is tested by touch rather than sight. Windows are secured just enough to allow air, but not access. Fire is banked, embers settled, so they will last without flaring. Light is reduced rather than extinguished all at once, leaving a soft glow to move by. Outside, the world sounds different now. Daytime noise has thinned. What remains feels more deliberate. Footsteps carry farther. Voices stand out. An animal shifts nearby, unseen, but clearly present. You listen longer before dismissing any sound. Night sharpens attention without raising alarm. You notice how people adjust behavior instinctively. Travel slows. Visits end earlier. Routes home are chosen carefully. Familiar paths matter more after dark. You trust what you know. Uncertainty grows heavier in low light inside. Small rituals continue. Shoes are placed within reach. Tools are set where they can be found quickly. These choices are not dramatic. They are simply habits shaped by experience. When something goes wrong at night, fumbling wastes precious seconds. Children are guided towards sleep gently but firmly. Stories quiet them. Familiar words reassure. Fear is acknowledged without being fed. Darkness is treated as normal, not threatening, but also not ignored. You teach calm through example. You feel how the night draws people inward. Conversations soften. Movement slows. The day's sharp edges dull. Even worry loses some of its urgency. Fatigue carries authority now. It tells you what must wait. You cannot be entirely certain what dangers are real and which are imagined. Stories circulate. Some are exaggerated, others are not. The line between them shifts with time and place. You prepare for both without naming them. As you settle, you sense how much trust is involved in sleep. You trust that the routines you followed are enough, that the latch will hold, that the embers will behave, that the world will keep its shape until morning. In 1880, American night is not conquered, it is accommodated. And as you lie down, listening to the last sounds of the house settling around you, you feel a quiet confidence rooted not in certainty, but in preparation. For now that is sufficient. You feel sleep approaching long before it arrives. It begins as a soft heaviness behind the eyes, then spreads outward, loosening the grip you've held on the day. In 1880, America sleep is not something you chase with intention. It takes you when the body decides it has done enough. You settle into bed without ceremony. The mattress gives in familiar places shaped over time by weight and habit. Straw shifts quietly. A quilt or blanket settles across you heavier than modern coverings meant to trap warmth rather than impress. Fabric carries the faint scent of smoke soap and use. It smells like the day you just lived. Your body is tired in a deep, uncomplicated way. Muscles ache, but not sharply. The soreness feels earned. There is little mental restlessness left to burn through. Thoughts slow naturally, one drifting into the next without urgency. Tomorrow exists, but it feels far away. You notice how the house sounds as it prepares for its own rest. Wood contracts slightly as temperatures drop. A distant animal moves and settles. Someone shifts in another room. These noises do not disturb you. They reassure you. They mean the world is still in place. Sleep here is shaped by exhaustion and environment. There are no glowing clocks, no hum of distant traffic, no steady electrical buzz. Darkness settles, fully interrupted only by moonlight, or a small flame left intentionally low. Shadows hold still. You drift in and out briefly, waking just enough to adjust your position or pull the blanket closer. This is not failure, it is normal. Sleep comes in waves, deepening gradually as the body lets go layer by layer. Dreams arrive without announcement. They borrow pieces from the day. Sounds, faces, movements. They are not elaborate narratives, just fragments rearranged gently. Work blends into memory. Worry softens into abstraction. You are not counting hours. You do not measure sleep. You trust it to do its work while you are not watching. Rest is something the body knows how to manage on its own. As breathing slows, you feel yourself recede from the edges of awareness. The world does not disappear. It simply becomes quieter, less insistent. Responsibility loosens its grip. In 1880, America's sleep is not optimized. It is surrendered to, and as you drift deeper, carried by fatigue, rather than intention, you feel the day finally release you completely. You rest in that in-between space where the day has ended, but morning has not yet begun. It feels suspended, held gently by darkness and quiet. In this final stretch of wakefulness, your mind drifts backward without effort, comparing what you know now to the life you've just walked through. You think about how ordinary everything felt. No single moment announced itself as historic. There were no speeches, no turning points, no sense that the world was holding its breath. And yet this is what life was made of. Repetition, adjustment, attention to small things. The weight of routine carried forward day after day, shaping lives without spectacle. You notice how much effort went into simply staying steady, food prepared and saved, work completed and repeated, relationships maintained through courtesy and restraint. Survival here was not dramatic. It was persistent. It asked for endurance more than bravery, consistency more than inspiration. You consider how different your own expectations might be, how used you are to immediacy, to brightness, to choice. In contrast, 1880, America moves slowly, deliberately, asking you to meet it on its terms. Nothing rushes to accommodate you. You adapt or you struggle, often both. You realize that comfort here was quieter. It lived in warmth rather than convenience, in familiarity rather than novelty. A good meal mattered not because it was exciting, but because it was reliable. A good night's sleep mattered not because it was tracked, but because it came at all. As you reflect, you feel respect rather than nostalgia. This was not a simpler time. It was a demanding one. Lives were bounded by limits that required constant negotiation, and within those limits, people built meaning patiently, often without naming it. You think about the people you pass through this day. The worker moving beside you, the child learning by watching, the neighbor offering help without ceremony. None of them thought of themselves as part of history. They were simply living inside it, doing what needed to be done. The world they inhabited feels both distant and familiar now. Different tools, different assumptions, the same human needs, safety, belonging, enough food, enough rest, enough hope to face the next morning. As your thoughts slow again, you are not judging one time against another. You are noticing continuity, how life adapts without ever fully changing its core demands. The day you lived in 1880, America fades gently, not because it was unimportant, but because it was complete. It did not need emphasis. It simply needed to be lived. And now, as your breathing evens out once more, the past loosens its hold, leaving behind a quiet understanding. Ordinary days are where history resides, and ordinary nights like this one are where the weight of them is finally set down. The room around you feels softer now, edges blurring gently as awareness recedes. There is no need to hold on to the details any longer. The sounds have quieted. The light is settled into darkness without effort. Your body knows what to do from here. Let the images drift away on their own. The creak of floorboards, the glow of lamplight, the slow turning of a day shaped by work and care. You do not need to remember them clearly. They have already done their work. Breath moves easily now, unmeasured and calm. Each exhale releases what remains of the day. Muscles sink further into rest. Thoughts stretch out and thin, losing their edges. You are safe in this moment. There is nothing left to prepare, nothing left to decide. The world can wait until morning. Allow sleep to take you fully, gently, without resistance. The past fades, the present softens, the night holds steady around you. Sweet dreams.